We already know that Georgia's quarterback for this season is Carson Beck, and he is the projected Heisman favorite. I'm not saying something's going to happen to him, but if something does, what does Georgia have behind him? And what does Georgia have next year? In Gunnar Stockton, and former four-star from the 2021 class, not far from Athens, right? About an hour and a half, even? Is it a full hour and a half? Rabun County, north of Athens. Nobody has thrown for more touchdowns in the state of Georgia. I don't think anyone scored as many touchdowns when you combine his rushing as well. In the history of Georgia high school football, a productive player that obviously has not been productive for Georgia because he just hasn't played. What Gunner has an opportunity to do, at least what's on the table, is exactly what Carson Beck did. Be in the program for 3 seasons as a backup, and then move on and become the starter in year 4. That's on the table for Gunner in 2025 if Ryan Puglisi doesn't beat him out. If Georgia doesn't sign a 5-star freshman or somebody that ends up becoming just an absolute monster, or they go to the transfer portal to replace somebody or to replace Carson Beck. That's what's on the table. And now we got to see him throw again. Got to see him, throw at Pro Day. It's because I'm having a drink. It's not alcoholic. Eco Poly. Shout out to them. It's actually a sparkling flavored water. Thank you very much. But saw Gunnar Stockton throw a Pro Day the other day, and it's something that we got to see Carson Beck do 2 years ago. So almost, it's very similar, right? Younger guy, you're not the guy yet, and you're the one that's tasked with throwing a Pro Day. Carson, I don't know what the decision was in terms of him not throwing to Ladd McConkey and Marcus Hosby-Jack Saint at Georgia's Pro Day last week. But it ended up being Gunnar Stockton. And look, there was some good, there was some bad. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here, talking about Gunnar Stockton. What we saw at Pro Day, what we saw at the Orange Bowl against Florida State, what we've seen at Rabun County over and over again. Between the 3 Dawg Posters, I think we've seen a lot of Gunnar Stockton, just an absolute ton of Gunnar Stockton. You talk about Matt going to watch him in the camps, me going up there and watching those high school games, Dean, I think, getting out to a couple of those, and then what you see at the Orange Bowl, I think that he's a very exciting quarterback prospect for Georgia. I think that Pro Day is not the place where Gunnar Stockton's going to shine as much. What is different about Gunnar Stockton than a Carson Beck? It's the legs. Gunnar Stockton is a power, not just a speed runner, he is a power runner as well. This is a guy that likes to run the football. If you watched him at Rabun County, if you went to a Rabun game, obviously, look, there were what's part of the reason why he had so many touchdowns? He had really good receivers, right? One of them's at Georgia in Braxton Hicks. He had really good receivers his entire career at Rabun, and he was able to just throw a bunch of deep balls, right? So that was part of his stats, not all of his stats, but he goes through his progressions. He makes decisions. You watch him make decisions. Sometimes you can really, if you really watch a quarterback's eyes, you really watch what's going on, you can see a quarterback struggling to make a choice. Kirk Cousins was talking about that the other day, how being quarterback, like the biggest part of it is making decisions. And I think that that's something like sometimes if you're watching from a vertical or from the end zone perspective, and if you're watching through a telescope, which I essentially have when I'm shooting these games with a giant lens, you get to watch people make decisions. Gunnar Stockton goes through reads. He makes choices. He doesn't hesitate very much. At least that's not what I've seen him do. Will he do that at the collegiate level? I don't know, but he's confident in his choices, something that I think Carson Beck is as well. But let's talk about Pro Day for a minute before I recap what we know and what we saw at Florida State or against Florida State in the Orange Bowl down in Miami Gardens. So deep ball didn't look great, right? Only threw 3 of them. Let's be real here. Of each route, he only threw 3, and he threw all sorts of routes to Ladd and Marcus Hosby-Jack Saint. I thought that his best stuff came on the outside routes towards the sideline. To be honest with you, I thought that's where Gunnar was the most accurate. On the 3-go routes, I think I looked over at Dean. I don't know why I made him laugh, but I looked over at Dean. I said, after they went through it at Ladd, Marcus, and then I forget who it was. Not someone that's projected to be drafted that was catching passes as well that day, last Wednesday. I looked over at Dean. I think Gunnar, I can't remember which order it was in, but Gunnar, let's say he misses one, then he hits one, and then he misses one. And by miss, I don't mean these were like incomplete passes. They were just short. The receivers got to turn around. They're slowing down on their route. It wasn't completely in stride. I said 1 for 3. So he was 1 for 3 on that go route to those players. But on the ones to the outside, and they did a lot of routes to the outside and some to the inside, some crossers, different zigs, different digs, all sorts of stuff. He was a lot more accurate on those, especially the ones that were closer to the sideline. Was he nervous? I think so. Don't call me like the mood doctor, but like you could tell a little bit that he was nervous. I think I've been, obviously I'm not hanging out with Gunnar Stockton, but I think I've been around enough players and can see looks in people's faces. You could tell, and that's just a life thing. That's not even just a football thing. But sometimes you can tell when somebody is just, they got nervous. Because what is pro day? It is throwing in front of scouts and coaches and managers for teams, NFL teams. And obviously, Gunnar Stockton wasn't really the one on trial. It was Ladd McConkey and Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards and those guys. But he got to throw. What was the difference between he and Carson Beck? Because 2 years ago, so the 2022 Pro Day that featured George Pickens as the only pass catcher, it featured guys like Trayvon Walker and that defensive line room. Carson Beck was the one that threw. So he would have been a year younger in the program than Gunnar Stockton at this point. But Carson, his arm talent flashed more than Gunnar's did that last week in this setting. Now, I also just in general think that Carson Beck has a more talented arm. Is that the best way to put it? I think he's a little bit more talented of a thrower of the football than Gunnar Stockton is. Gunnar Stockton is a good decision maker from what I've watched, right? From the collegiate level, it's not as much, but he's a good decision maker. He's a bruising runner, and he is an accurate thrower of the football. He doesn't quite have the zip. His throwing motion isn't as quick either as Carson Beck's, and I think that Carson can make more throws. Now, Carson was throwing to George Pickens as well. Obviously, someone who has been a pretty good NFL receiver to this point and was obviously really, really good at Georgia. But it just flashed more, right? The ball came out quicker. The ball was a little bit more accurate with Carson a couple years ago when they were in this type of setting. But in hindsight, looking back on it, I think Gunnar handled the pressure. It's a high pressure situation. But I think that they wanted someone that obviously has thrown and had chemistry with those guys. So you think about the Orange Bowl with him. And he threw for only 96 yards, right? But he's got the 2 touchdowns. He runs for a good bit. He ends up running for 46 yards, 6 yards a carry, 6.6 yards per carry. That was the thing that was the most noticeable about Gunnar, is that they were designing runs for him. They were designing quarterback draws. They were calling them up. They wanted him to have the football in his hands. So what you can expect if/when Gunnar Stockton is the quarterback, the starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, is you can expect the quarterback run to be a featured part of the offense, because that's one of the things that makes him a good football player. He is a dual threat football player. Around the line of scrimmage, I think that he'd be a really good quarterback, right? You think about someone who's built lower to the ground, thicker, someone that is Jalen Hurts, right? So is he as fast as Jalen Hurts? I don't think so. But in terms of being a powerful runner as a quarterback, you want to know a guy that could complete the tush push. I think Gunnar Stockton is one of those football players. But in the Orange Bowl, you saw him not afraid to take risks, right? He threw balls into some really tight windows. I'm thinking about one right now that he threw to Marcus Rosner-Jackson, which I didn't think he should have thrown that ball. And ends up being completed. There was confidence there. There was one ball definitely could have been intercepted in the Orange Bowl that Gunnar threw, but it was a good showing for him. What was the defense that he was playing against the Seminoles that day? I don't know. Was it their second string? Was it their third string? Was it their fourth string? It's tough to tell. But he had a good day. And I think that being able to go out in a setting like the pro day the other day and throw and have that kind of pressure and it be in those tryout type settings, good experience for Gunnar Stockton. Experience matters. There's a reason why all 4 or all scholarship quarterbacks travel to every game. They make the travel roster, even though a fourth quarterback is almost never, ever going to go into a game. He got that experience in 2022 because experience is the most important thing. It's one of the most important things in football that helps you just be better than others, is knowing how to do things, having accomplished them. So now Gunnar Stockton checks another thing off his box. We get to see him again. And this week in practice, I'm going to try to do a better job of watching the quarterbacks. Didn't pay too much attention last time just because we know what you have in Carson Beck. Thank you for watching.